Welcome back to Hardball. Rush Limbaugh used his nationally syndicated radio show the other day to criticize veterans who speak out against the Iraq War. Rush was criticizing the anti-war movement generally and then had this exchange with a caller.
It's not possible intellectually to follow these people.
No, it's not. And what's really funny is they never talk to real soldiers. They like to pull these soldiers to come up out of the blue and stop the media.
The phony soldiers.
Well, is it unpatriotic for Iraq veterans to come back and criticize the war they fought in? That's the Hardball debate tonight. John Soltz is an Iraq War veteran, now an anti-war activist with VoteVets.org. And Buzz Patterson is the vice chairman of the MoveOn.org, actually the Move America Forward group, big mistake there, and a former military aide to President Clinton. Let me go right now to John. Obviously, you believe you're within your rights as a citizen. In fact, you're being patriotic, I assume, in your thinking, to oppose this war.
Yeah, look, opposing this war right now in Iraq is central to defeating bin Laden and al-Qaeda. I mean, basically, George Bush has let bin Laden and al-Qaeda get away. And even Mr. Zawahiri wants what a lot of, the far right want in this country, which is America's military bogged down in Iraq. And we have a duty and an obligation when people like us soldiers and Marines are, killing and being killed in Iraq, when the battle basically, or the president's policy is nothing more than his political strategy so he doesn't have to lose. And that's not good enough when we have enemies out there like al-Qaeda and bin Laden that we have to deal with. And we have an obligation when we're done with our military service and we get off active duty to speak up. And for Rush to say that, I mean, hey, I just want to know, invite me on the show, brother, because I want to have a one-on-one discussion about how our service is phony when this is a guy that, didn't go to Vietnam because he had a bump on his butt. So, I mean, this guy's a draft dodger. We need to have this debate, so let's have it.
Well, let me talk about the general question, not my colleague Rush Limbaugh. Phony soldiers, however, is a phrase worthy of discussion. Buzz, do you buy that a person who comes back and opposes the war is a phony?
Well, in some cases, yes, Chris. I'll tell you, first off, for John's edification, we are, in fact, fighting al-Qaeda in Iraq. So I think he's missed that point on several occasions so far. We are fighting al-Qaeda in Iraq. Secondly, I think what John's missing also, I'm sure John's a great guy, but what John's missing also is that it's not only is it unpatriotic as a soldier to voice your opinion while still in uniform, it's also
illegal.
What about
veterans? What about veterans to come back and say they thought the war was wrong having fought in it?
It depends, Chris, on whether they're still in the service or not. I'm retired, for example, so I can say things that I believe. John's still in the reserves. And, for example, you cannot be active duty member or be in reserve in training or doing your drills in uniform and be contemptuous of the U.S. government or the president. That's a violation of Article 88 of the UCMJ.
Yeah, that's not true. I have right here the actual memorandum from the Secretary of Defense and from the 1344-10, which is very clear in its guidance. And obviously, I don't speak as a member of the military whatsoever. I speak as the chairman of VoteVets.org as a private citizen.
True, John,
but
what's the operative language?
The policy is very clear. The policy, if you are on active duty, you cannot participate in partisan American politics. And as it says here, if you are a member of the National Guard, if you are a member of the National Guard or Reserves, not on active duty, you are not subject to most of these restrictions.
We can yell at each other.
So
we can have a conversation.
It's very clear that if you're a member of the National Guard or Reserves, much like the head of, hey Chris,
Buzz, wait a minute.
Let me finish this, please. Chris, you have myself on all the time with Pete Hegseth from Vets for Freedom, correct? Pete Hegseth, if you go on the Vets for Freedom website, is a member of the Army National Guard with a picture of himself in the military. So when he comes onto the show like I do, we come on as private citizens. So if you are not on active duty, much like Congressman Boyer or Lindsey Graham, then you can participate in politics as long as you don't in any formal capacity represent the military.
Okay, Buzz, just a minute, Buzz. Now explain what regulation are you citing that says that a veteran who's come back is not permitted to participate in politics? What are you citing? Just cite something. Let me know what we're talking about here.
John's cherry-picking 1344. What it says is if you are active duty, which reservists are when they do training and do their drills, they are not allowed to be contemptuous of the president.
So when you're on 2 weeks duty every year, a reservist does 2 weeks of active duty. When you're on those active duty orders, those 2 weeks a year,
one at a time, damn it. One at a time. John, quiet. All right, this is ridiculous. Show some courtesy, you two gentlemen. First of all, it's your turn, Buzz. Take 30 seconds and say something clearly, and then you respond to it, John. Stop this.
What John's doing here is he's playing both sides of the coin. He wants to be considered a commissioned officer when he shouts down a young sergeant at the Cost Kids convention in Chicago. He wants to be a captain then, but he doesn't want to be held accountable for.
Well, let's talk about the rules. Can you
Rules
cite
are
rules,
Article-
sir, that says you cannot participate in politics once you return from the military service?
Article 88 of the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice, U.S. Army Regulation 370-1 in the DOD 1344-1, which John has pointed to, but he's also cherry-picking the facts. What he's missing is the fact that he is still in the reserves. He does get a DOD paycheck. He does his drills, in which he's active duty when he does those drills, and he's using his uniform as an anti-government, anti-President Bush message. That is across the line.
Okay, let's go back to John. It seems to me we have members of Congress who vote on the floor, express political positions all the time, who are on reserves. Barry Goldwater was a reserve general for years, and he was an outspoken conservative in this country. I've never heard that being in reserve stops you from being a politician, but clarify.
Yes, sir, it's exactly true. What Buzz is saying is technically part of it is accurate, and I'll explain is that when you're on active duty for those 2 weeks, when you come on active duty orders for 2 weeks, then you don't do any politics for those 2 weeks. Like when Lindsey Graham goes to Iraq and does his duty, he doesn't do politics. So, but once you come back off of active duty status and you become a reserve status, well, you're not really getting a full DOD paycheck. So what you do is you don't do politics during that time period. It says right here in this from this memorandum from the Undersecretary of Defense from 2004 that reserve component members not on active duty may make speeches at partisan political events but may not do so in their uniform and must comply with general rules. So it's very clear that members of Congress and activists on both sides of the debate, on the right and the left, that our reservists are important
Buzz,
to this debate.
Your view?
Important point here. Again, John is technically correct in that aspect. But does he pull off his website when he does his drill every year? Does he pull his picture of his uniform, himself in his uniform, off his website when he does a drill?
I don't know what you. I mean, there's no picture on my website of me in uniform.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Let's,
well, then you pulled it off recently,
there's
John.
There's no picture of me on my website in uniform.
Okay.
There used to be, John.
I've learned some things here.
When'd you pull it off?
No, there's just no pictures. There's no pictures of me on my website. There are pictures on the website.
I think that might be a technical point, but we agree you can't be marching around on reserve duty when you've been activated for the summer for your responsibility. You can't be pamphleteering among your fellow soldiers. We agree on that point. Anyway.